All right, so today we're diving into something that's been making waves in the Python world. This new package manager called UV.
Huh.
You guys send over a bunch of stuff for us to look at,
Yeah.
like an article from Better Stack community. We've got the GitHub repo. You even threw in some of your own personal notes, which is great.
Always helpful.
Yeah, always helpful. And I think the goal today is to really figure out, what's the big deal with this UV? Why is everyone talking about it?
Right.
And most importantly, how can it maybe help us, help you, help our listeners write better Python code, or at least, manage their projects better?
Exactly. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet for everyone, getting them up to speed on a tool that they might find really, really useful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, first things first, what is it?
Well, UV is calling itself the next generation package manager for Python, and it's built on Rust. So right off the bat, you get the sense that they're really focused on speed and performance.
I mean, right away when I saw Rust, I thought performance, but it's not just about being fast, right?
No.
I think it's trying to rethink how we do dependency management.
Exactly. Bringing some fresh ideas, a modern approach to it.
Yeah, and the Better Stack article, that was a really good one. It made this bold statement that is aiming to be a direct replacement for tools we use all the time.
Whoa.
pip-tools.
Whoa.
Big shoes to fill.
Huge shoes to fill.
That suggests we might be able to do away with different things and just have this one thing.
That's the hope.
Yeah. And then, peeking at the GitHub repo, they're really doubling down on this. It's like we replace these things, and then they even throw in, oh, and by the way, we're coming for pipx, poetry.
Ambitious.
Ambitious is an understatement.
It is, yeah.
It's like the Thanos of the Python packaging world.
It does kind of feel that way.
So to use this,
Yeah.
what do people need?
Well, usually you need a fairly recent version of Python, but, and this is where it gets interesting, both your notes and the article highlighted that UF can actually download and manage different Python versions for you.
Whoa. Okay, so if you don't have the right Python, no problem.
Not a problem at all.
You've got you covered. I like that.
That could really change how we manage those different project requirements, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about why should any of our listeners even consider this? The Better Stack article called it a power tool.
Ooh, I like that.
I like that. Okay, this is serious business.
This is like moving up to a whole new level.
Yeah. Let's start with the obvious. Speed, right? Everyone's buzzing about how fast it is.
Oh, yeah. And the numbers they're throwing around are crazy. The article mentioned pip taking several seconds, UV doing the same in milliseconds.
Wow. Okay.
And then you look at the GitHub repo, they're claiming 10x to 100x faster than pip.
Let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
Think about that. 10 to 100 times. That's not just a little bit faster.
No kidding. That's a whole different ballgame.
And for our listeners out there, think about your workflow. Think about your CI/CD pipelines. Imagine how much time you'd save if every install was that much faster.
Oh, yeah, that's going to add up.
Your bills might go down.
Definitely. Or at least you'd be able to get through your workday a lot faster. No more sitting there staring at the terminal waiting for pip to finish.
Yeah. I'm thinking of all those times. It's like, come on, hurry up.
You know what I mean?
I know. All right, so speed, we've established. Another pain point for a lot of us, virtual environments.
Oh, don't get me started.
That is handle that.
Well, it seems like they've got a really elegant solution there.
Really?
Yeah. You don't have to do that whole Python-mv dance and then remember to activate it. It takes care of creating that .pyenv directory, and it's smart enough to figure out the right Python version to use.
Wow. No more forgetting to activate.
Right.
I've done that so many times.
It happens to the best of us. They even say that the source activate, that still works if you're used to that.
Right.
But they've got this cool UV run Python app.py. You can just run your script, and it'll automatically use the correct environment without you having to activate it manually.
I like that.
I know, it's pretty neat. And the GitHub documentation, their examples, they really showcase the simplicity.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, look, we want to make your life easier right from the start.
Exactly. Less friction, more coding.
Yeah. And this ties into a bigger point, the whole idea of modern dependency resolution, right?
Yes, absolutely. This is something they really emphasize in the Better Stack article.
Yeah.
Because unlike pip, which we all know can sometimes lead to environments that are, let's say, a little bit unpredictable.
A little flaky.
A little flaky. BUV is all about creating reproducible environments, so it uses this really precise dependency resolution, and they have this lockfile system.
That's crucial. I mean, for teams, for deployments, for making sure everyone's on the same page. You don't want to be in that situation where it's like, it works on my machine.
Yeah, exactly. The lock file that they talk about, both in the article and in the GitHub repo, it's called uv.lock.
Right.
It's basically a snapshot of your entire dependency tree. It records the exact versions of everything, not just what you directly install, but also all the dependencies of your dependencies, the transitive dependencies.
So no more, oh, this library updated and now my whole project's broken.
You said it, because with that lock file, whenever you, your teammates, whoever, install or update things, you're all guaranteed to get the exact same versions that were tested and that, work together.
Okay, so we've got speed, we've got reliability. The Better Stack article also mentioned this phrase, project first approach. What do they mean by that?
So instead of just throwing all your packages into a requirements.txt file, which, let's face it, can get pretty messy pretty quickly,
Yeah.
UV is built around this standard called pyproject.toml. This is becoming like the gold standard in Python packaging.
The official way to do things.
Yeah, and it lets you define all the important stuff about your project, like its name, its version, even dependencies, all in this one nicely organized file.
Way cleaner than a loose requirements.txt.
I know, right? And the cool thing is, the Better Stack article, they even mentioned that when you run that init project name command, it actually creates this pyproject.toml file for you, along with a readme.md and a little sample Python script, to get you started.
It's like they're saying, here's the best way to organize your project right out of the gate.
That's the idea. And because everything is in that one file, it's much easier to keep track of changes.
Especially when you're using Git or something for version control.
Exactly. And the GitHub documentation, they really emphasize this in their project management section as well.
Yeah, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah. It's just a cleaner, more robust way to handle things. And, it's part of this larger trend in Python to kind of standardize how we configure projects. So it makes it easier for other people to understand what's going on, easier to share, easier to collaborate.
Okay, so far so good. But how do we actually get started with this thing?
Let's walk through the installation. The Better Stack article actually had a really clear step-by-step guide. So the first thing is to check if you already have Python installed.
Right.
Just a quick Python 3 version. You might get something like Python 3.1, 3.2, just to see what you're working with.
Gotcha.
And then the recommended way to install UV is to use their official installation script. If you're on Mac OS or Linux, it's this one-liner with curl that downloads and runs the script for you.
Straightforward.
Yeah, super easy. And for Windows folks, it's a similar thing, but using PowerShell. You had the exact commands in your notes, right?
Yeah. For macOS and Linux, it's curl-lss/https.astral.shoveinstall.shesh. And for Windows, you'd run PowerShell execution policy bypass -er rm https.astral.shoveinstall.ps1 Easy peasy.
Right, and by default, this installs UV to this directory called .localbin. That's what the Better Stack article said.
Okay, and then I remember seeing that you need to restart your terminal after that.
Yeah, that's important. Both the article and your notes mention that.
So you're saying that after the installation, you'd run something like sourcehome.localbin to refresh things.
Exactly. And then just to double check that everything worked, you can run UV version. The Better Stack article gave an example, output.uv 0.5.31. E38S 4900 2502 12.
Yeah, in my notes, they also mentioned that if you just want the version number without all the extra build details, you can use uv-v.
That's a nice touch. So once you've confirmed that it's installed, let's actually start using it.
Pick a project.
Okay, so in the Better Stack article, they walked us through creating a new Python project. Like you'd expect, you start by making a directory for it. So mkdir uvdefo and cduvdemo.
Standard stuff. And then what's the UV way to create a virtual environment?
Well, here's where things get really cool. You just run pyenv. And the article showed what the output looks like. It highlights 3 things this one command does. 1, it creates that .pyenv directory. 2, it figures out which Python version makes sense for your project. Automatically. And 3, if it doesn't find the right Python version on your system, it downloads and installs it for you.
Wow. Okay. This is getting good.
Right. That's super powerful. And then if you want to activate that virtual environment, you can still use that familiar source .pyenv by activate command.
Right.
But get this, the article also said you often don't even need to activate it manually.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty clever how they've set things up.
Okay, so installing packages, I'm guessing we're not using pip install anymore.
Nope. So it's almost the same, right?
Right.
But the Better Stack article, they used
UV.
pip install requests as an example. And they were saying how much faster the output is.
I believe it.
Yeah. And the article mentioned that achieves this by installing packages in parallel,
Okay.
and often by skipping this whole step called wheel building.
Wheel build.
So basically, Python packages, they can be pre-compiled into this specific format. It's called a wheel, and sometimes that's helpful, but a lot of times it just takes extra time.
Gotcha. So UV's like, skip the formalities, let's get this done.
Yeah, exactly. And you can install multiple packages at once if you want. UV pip install requests numpy pandas.
Nice.
Or if you need specific versions, you can do that too. UV pip install Django 5.0, something like that. So it's really flexible, really familiar if you've used pip before.
And to run our Python scripts, what's the magic command?
Well, the article gave this example where they made a little Python file called app.py, and then they ran it with uv run python app.py.
Simple as that.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that even if you haven't activated the virtual environment manually, UV will automatically make sure that your script runs in the right environment.
So it's like one less thing to worry about.
Exactly. No more, oops, I ran this in the wrong environment, and now everything's messed up.
Exactly. Okay. We've covered the basics, but I want to go back to that whole project management thing, with pyproject.toml and all that.
Yeah, let's dig deeper into that. So the BetterStack article kind of walked us through this scenario. First, you deactivate your current virtual environment using deactivate. Then you probably go back up a directory or two just to get out of that project folder. And then to start a new you've managed project, you'd run init and then the name of your project, demo, for example.
All right. So what does that command actually do?
Well, it creates a new directory with the name you gave it, you've managed demo in this case, and then it puts some essential files in there to get you started.
Okay. So what files are we talking about?
Well, if you then go into that directory with cd uv managed demo and you list the files with ls, you'll typically see your current directory, a reme.ma file, that all-important pyproject.toml file, and then a simple Python script, usually called something like hello.py.
So it's like a little starter kit.
Exactly.
Okay. So if we open up that pyproject.toml, what's inside?
Well, right at the start, you'll see this project section, which has basic info about your project. Its name, the version number, a short description, a link to the README file.
Okay. The standard stuff.
Yeah. You'll also see a line for the required Python version. They usually make it pretty flexible so your project can run on different versions of Python.
Makes sense.
And then here's the key part. There's a list for your project's dependencies.
Right. And at the beginning, that's going to be empty.
Totally empty because you haven't added any dependencies yet. But this is where you tell what your project needs in order to work properly. And the BetterStack article went on to explain how you add those dependencies. So instead of installing packages directly, you use this command of add.
Okay, so let's say we need the request library.
You would just run add requests. And that will not only install requests into your project's virtual environment, but it'll also add it to the dependency list in your pyproject.toml file. It'll usually specify a minimum version of requests that your project needs to work.
And this is where that log file comes in, right?
Exactly. This is what makes up so cool. When you add that dependency, it also updates this file called uv.lock, which we talked about earlier.
Right, the blueprint for your project's dependencies.
Precisely. And it makes sure that anyone working on the project or anytime you deploy it, you're always using the exact same versions of every single package, even those indirect dependencies.
No more surprises.
No more surprises.
So if you need to add multiple dependencies, can you do that all at once?
You bet.
Easy. And what about specific versions?
You can totally specify versions. It's just like with pip. So you could do something like add Django 4.0 if you need Django version 4 or above.
Okay, so that's adding dependencies. What if you need to remove something?
Well, that's super easy too. You just use remove and then the name of the package you want to get rid of. Like you've removed requests.
And that will uninstall it from the virtual environment.
Absolutely. And it'll also update your pyproject.toml and that uv.lock file to reflect the change.
It's really keeping everything in sync.
Yeah. It's like it's watching your back and making sure everything is consistent.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about collaboration? Like if I'm working with a team or I'm setting up the project on a new machine.
This is where USync comes in.
Yeah, okay.
So let's say you've got your project on GitHub, right?
Oh.
And it's got your pyproject and your uv.lock file, which specifies all those exact versions.
Right.
When you clone that repository to a new machine or a teammate pulls the latest changes, they can just run USync.
And it'll just set everything up.
It'll install all the packages, the exact versions based on those files, and it makes sure that everyone is working with the exact same environment.
No more compatibility headaches.
No more, oh, I'm using a different version of this library and now it's breaking.
Yeah.
It's a really elegant way to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, and then running scripts, it's still UV run, right?
Yep. UV run hello.py, for example. And again, you don't have to worry about activating the environment. UV takes care of that for you.
That's so convenient. This whole project-centric approach seems to be like baked into UV's DNA.
It really does. And, this kind of leads us into another way that UV helps you structure your projects better. Dependency groups.
Dependency groups. Tell me more about that.
So the Better Stack article, they explain that this lets you categorize your dependencies based on what they're used for.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's a great way to stay organized.
Okay, so what are the benefits? Why should I care about dependency groups?
Well, for starters, it helps you keep your production environments lean and mean.
Lean and mean. Okay, I like it.
You only install what's absolutely necessary for the app to run in production.
Right.
Then you've got your development tools, things like testing frameworks, linters, formatters. You can keep them separate, organized, so they don't clutter up your production environment.
Okay, so how does this work in practice? Like, how do you use these dependency groups?
All right, so the article, they said that when you use the basic add command, the package you add gets put into the main dependencies for your project.
Okay.
And you'll see this in your pyproject.toml file. There's a section called project.dependencies, and that's where they'll list it.
Makes sense. Straightforward. But what about tools that I only need for development?
Like testing.
Yeah, testing, linting, formatting.
Okay, that's where the dev flag comes in. So if you run uv add dev pytest black mypy, you're saying these are development dependencies. And uv will be smart about it. It'll create a new section in your pyproject.tom pin called dependency groups.
Okay.
And in there, it'll define a group called dev
Okay.
and list those packages under it. So pytest, they'll all be in that dev group. And the cool thing is, these aren't installed by default. So when you do a regular install or sync for a production environment, you're not bringing in all that extra stuff.
Okay, I'm liking this a lot.
Right. It keeps things nice and clean.
So how do I use these dev dependencies when I do need them?
You can specifically run commands that use those dev dependencies.
Okay. So it's like a special mode for development tasks.
Exactly. And you can create other dependency groups too. If you wanted to group your linters together, you could do something like add group lint.
Okay, so that would create a group called lint.
Yep. And then, just like with the dev group, you can use the group flag to run commands that use those specific dependencies. So for example, if you wanted to run flake8, you would run group lint flake8, and then maybe the name of the file you want to lint.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of control over how your project is set up and what gets installed when.
Okay, let's talk about one of the things that really caught my eye early on, the whole managing multiple Python versions thing.
Ah, yes, that's a big one.
How does of handle that?
So traditionally, managing different Python versions for different projects, it's been kind of a pain.
It's a hassle.
Right. You'd often need separate tools like pyenv, for example.
Yeah.
But UV aims to simplify that. It's got this built-in Python version management. So it can detect, install, switch between different Python versions, all without you having to use external tools.
It's pretty slick. So the Better Stack article said that if you've already got Python installed, UV will just find it and use it.
That's right. No extra configuration needed. And you can check which Python version it's using with avrun Python version.
Okay, but what if I need a specific Python version for a project, and it's not the one that's already on my system?
No problem. So UV's got you covered. So they have these commands for installing specific Python versions. You could do uv python install 3.12, for example.
Okay, so it'll download and install Python 3.12.
Exactly. And if you just want the latest and greatest Python, you can just run uv python install without specifying a version. It'll figure it out for you.
Nice. And I think my notes had these commands too, so everyone can refer back to those.
Super helpful.
But just installing it doesn't mean that my project will automatically use that new version, right?
You're right. There's one more step. So you need to tell which Python version you want to use for a particular project.
Okay, how do we do that?
You declare it in your pyproject.toml file. There's this field called requires-python, and you set it to the version you need.
So if I need at least Python 3.1, I'd put requires-python equals 3.1.
You got it. And then to actually use that Python version, you run this command.uv python pin 3.12.
Okay. Pin it down. And what happens then?
We'll go ahead and update your project's virtual environment to use that version of Python. And it might even recreate the virtual environment just to make sure everything is clean and compatible.
Wow, it's really thorough.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how it all works together. And get this, one of the coolest things is that uvev can automatically install the right Python version for you if it's not already there.
You're kidding.
No kidding. So let's say your project needs Python 3.11 and you don't have it. You could run a command like uvx python at 3.11 months C print hello world.
Okay.
uvev will realize that you don't have Python 3.11. It'll download and install it for you, and then it'll run that command.
Wow, that's so convenient.
I know. It takes care of all the heavy lifting. Same thing if you just run uvev and there's no compatible Python version on your system, it'll download and install the latest stable version. It really is. Now, if you're a control freak like me and you want to be in charge of your Python installations, you can disable this automatic download feature.
Okay. How do you do that?
You just add a flag to your commands.uv no Python download.
So it gives you the flexibility to do things manually if you want.
Exactly. But I mean, let's be honest, most of the time it's super helpful to just let off handle it.
Yeah. Okay. So UV is doing a lot of cool stuff. But for those of us who are used to pip, is the learning curve steep?
Well, it seems like they've really tried to make the transition smooth.
Okay.
The GitHub repository and their docs really emphasize this. UV is designed to be a drop-in replacement for a lot of the commands we use all the time with pip, pip-tools, and even virtualenv.
So you're saying I can start using OV without having to learn a whole new set of commands?
Pretty much. Yeah.
And they even said something about extensions to the pip interface.
Yes. So they've added some extra features like the ability to override dependency versions, and they've made dependency resolution even more reproducible.
Okay, can you give us some concrete examples of this pip compatibility in action?
Sure. The docs have some good examples. So let's say you use pip-tools to manage your requirements files.
Okay.
You know how you'd use bit-compile? Well, in uv, you would use uvf-compile.
So it's literally the same command, just with uv in front.
Pretty much. And the same goes for creating virtual environments. It's all about making the transition as painless as possible.
It's like you're getting all these performance improvements and new features, but you don't have to relearn how to manage your projects.
Exactly. And the docs go on to list a bunch of other really cool features.
Yeah, there was a whole section on other notable features.
Right. It's like wants to be the ultimate Swiss Army knife for Python development.
They mentioned replacing pipx, poetry, all sorts of stuff.
It's ambitious, but honestly, looking at what they've already done, I wouldn't bet against them.
And the speed, that's a constant theme.
Oh, yeah. 10 to 100 times faster than pip.
That's not just hype, that's a game changer.
Absolutely. And they're really pushing the idea of a universal lock file to manage everything, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it seems like a really solid foundation for reliable builds and deployments.
I think so, too.
Okay, there was one thing I didn't quite understand. They mentioned something about running scripts with inline dependency metadata.
Oh, yeah. That's for those times when you're just working with a single Python file.
Okay.
You can actually declare the dependencies your script needs directly in the script itself, often as comments. And then you can use a command like add script example.pyrequests to link those comments to your script.
Interesting.
So when you run the script with a rerun example.py, UV will automatically install those dependencies in a separate environment before running your code.
That's pretty handy for those one-off scripts, when you don't want to create a whole project structure.
Exactly. Or if you're sharing little code snippets with someone, you can just include the dependencies right there in the file.
Makes sense. And they also talked about managing command line tools, sort of like how pipx does it.
Yep. You can install tools using a pip-tool install, and then you can run them using evx.
Okay, so it's like another layer of functionality on top of everything else.
Right. And for those big, complex projects, they even have support for cargo-style workspaces.
I'm always concerned about disk space, especially with Python projects.
Well, Eve tries to be efficient with disk space. It uses a global cache to avoid storing duplicate copies of packages.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it can really save you space, especially as your projects grow.
Okay, so Eva sounds pretty amazing, but what if I need to uninstall it?
Your notes had that covered.
They did.
So the first thing you do is clean up the cache using of-cache-clean. Then you remove the directories where Uv keeps all the different Python versions and installed tools. And finally, you just delete the UV and UVX executables from your system.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It is.
Okay, so big picture. What are the main things our listeners should take away from all of this?
I think the key takeaway is that compelling alternative to the way we've been managing Python projects.
Yeah, the speed alone is impressive.
It's not just speed, though.
No, it's not.
It's the whole package. The way it handles virtual environments, the rock-solid dependency resolution with that lock file, the emphasis on project structure with pyproject.toml and those dependency groups.
Right, and the Python version management, expert speaker. UV